Sadie, why isn't dinner ready yet? I got home 5 minutes ago and I'm hungry.
Gosh, Dan, hang on a minute. It will be done in 20 minutes. Just relax.
Don't tell me to relax. Never talk back to me this way.
Dan hit me across the face and I fell to the ground, even hitting my stomach. I cried on the ground for hours and Dan stormed out and just left me there. He told me he was going to have lunch with a female colleague and bragged about how beautiful she was and that I was becoming too fat like a pig. Hey there, my name is Sadie, and I finally got out of one of the most toxic relationships I had ever been in. It ended in a complete explosion of exposure and revenge, too, and I am going to tell you the whole story. I met Dan about a year ago, and we immediately hit it off great. He was studying to be a doctor, which meant he was going to be raking in the big bucks in no time. I was studying to become a nurse, too, but that ended when I discovered that I was pregnant, and I had to drop out. The first red flags I noticed in Dan was that when I discovered I was pregnant, he questioned if it was even his, and accused me of lying about my pregnancy. Although this upset me, we were now going to have a child together, and I needed to keep the peace. When he finally accepted that the baby was his, he proposed to me, and we got married soon after. We did this because his parents were very religious and couldn't stand the thought of having an illegitimate grandson. The wedding was fine, but it was rushed, and he didn't even take me on a honeymoon. Instead, he just spent the night of our wedding studying.
You know, I have to study. Work is my life. Being a doctor is going to be my entire life.
But I should be a big part of your life too. I'm your wife. And we are about to have a baby together.
Yes, but you and the baby will always come second. If I don't have a high-paying job, how will I support you?
He did have a point, but that just didn't sit right with me. It was like Dan's attitude completely changed as soon as we got married. He started spewing all this nonsense about how a woman's place is in the home and how dinner should be ready every day as soon as he steps in. He would constantly compare me to past girlfriends and say how much better they treated him. This kind of verbal abuse went on for some time and only got worse and worse until it escalated into physical violence.
Sadie, why isn't dinner ready yet? I got home 5 minutes ago and I'm hungry.
Gosh, Dan, hang on a minute. It will be done in 20 minutes. Just relax.
Don't tell me to relax. Never talk back to me this way.
Dan hit me across the face and I fell to the ground, even hitting my stomach. I cried on the ground for hours and Dan stormed out and just left me there. He told me he was going to have lunch with a female colleague and bragged about how beautiful she was and that I was becoming too fat like a pig. You might be wondering why I wouldn't walk out right then, but it isn't that simple. I have grown up poor all my life and couldn't stand the thought of my baby being faced with the same conditions. I felt like I needed to stay in this abusive relationship to save my baby. Things got worse as Dan got more comfortable with treating me like trash. One day he came home and said he had a new job for me. He told me that from that day forward, I was to do all of his medical schoolwork while he goes out and has fun with other women. He told me that if I refuse, he would kick me and our unborn child to the streets and let us fend for ourselves. For the next week or so, I slaved away doing all of his assignments while he was out doing God knows what. I ignored my horrible morning sickness and worked for hours and hours. The only time I took a break was to find out the sex of our baby, and it turned out to be an awakening moment for me. When the doctor told me it was going to be a little girl, I had a vision. I thought about what this little girl would think about me taking abuse from some little man, and just like that, I was awoken. I walked out of that doctor's office a new woman, and I pledged to burn Dan to the ground for what he put me through. The first step of my plan was to acquire some form of evidence of Dan's abuse. I was able to go back to our home security footage and extract the clip of him striking me in the face. I saved that video on a thumb drive and stored it safely away. Next, I set up a microphone in our living room and waited for him to verbally abuse me. Sure enough, as soon as he got home and saw that I had not even started dinner, he began screaming his head off at me and threatening to kill me. The third part of my plan was to catch him cheating, so when I filed for divorce, I could take everything from him and leave him with nothing. I hired a private detective to follow him, and he went on to catch him cheating with not one, not two, but 3 different girls. My devil husband was cheating on me with 3 different women. I couldn't believe it. Once I had all of this evidence, I was ready to go to the police station and to a divorce attorney when it happened. My water broke. I was rushed to the hospital where I went into labor. Of course, Dan was nowhere in sight because he was probably off with some girl. My parents arrived, and even Dan's parents arrived. After hours of agony, my baby was finally here, a beautiful little girl who I decided to name Michelle. Finally, Dan walked in the door. He apologized for being late and made up some excuse about work. Luckily, when I was rushed to the hospital, I still had all of the evidence in my bag, and I couldn't think of a better time to bring Dan to justice. Shut up, Dan. I know everything. I'm done putting up with your abuse.
Sadie, not now. Not in front of my parents. Let's talk about this later.
I don't care if your parents are here, let them hear. One by one, I showed them all of the evidence I had. My father turned red with anger when he saw Dan hit me, and my mom became enraged when she saw all of the cheating evidence. When the tape played and everyone heard all of the horrible things Dan had said to me, they were disgusted.
I can't believe you, Dan. You are a horrible person.
That's right, son. We are disgusted that you are related to us. Me and your mother are no longer paying for your college tuition, effective immediately. Mom, Dad, please, no.
I couldn't help but laugh. He was pathetic. What made it even better was that we were at the hospital where Dan works part-time, and all of his coworkers saw him crying like a baby. Word got around, and Dan's boss eventually heard about it. He stormed in and was faced with all the evidence and fired Dan on the spot. Just then, my dad couldn't contain his anger for Dan any longer. He walked right up to him and socked him in the face, and Dan fell to the ground. We all laughed at him when he fell. Next, we called the police and showed them the footage of Dan hitting me, and they cuffed him and hauled him away. While Dan was in lockup, I met with a divorce attorney who assured me that I would get more than half of everything because of all the evidence against Dan. Even behind bars, Dan was stripped of any money he had on the outside, and it all went to me. I used the money to buy lots of nice things for my new baby girl. Dan eventually was sentenced to 12 years in a maximum security prison for aggravated assault and battery. On top of this, his name was added to a list of names that would never be able to hold positions of power, including being a doctor. It felt nice knowing that Dan's dreams of being a doctor could never come true. Matter of fact, I went on to enlist in medical school, and am currently on the way to becoming a doctor. After all those hours of doing Dan's work, I had learned so much and was flying through my schoolwork. Dan's parents cut off all contact with him and instead focus all of their energy on me and my daughter, who they love very much. They even offered to pay for my entire tuition and help pay for all the bills for Michelle, which was the best help I could have ever asked for. As for Dan, I heard he spends his days getting beat to pulp in prison for being such an annoying nuisance. I heard he even tried to work in the medical area of the prison he is in, but was rejected because he had lost all of the knowledge from school as a result of being punched in the face so many times. My life these days is perfect, and Michelle will grow up with a strong mother who will be a doctor, and grandparents who love her very much. Some might think that what I did to Dan was too far, but I think he can rot in prison where he belongs. What do you think? We even followed each other on our social media platforms. I was surprised to see he had 1 million followers. However, you can imagine my shock when I found a picture of us together on his profile the next day, with another horrible one just below. My father-in-law covered his head and arms with bandages. In his caption, he wrote that his son's Japanese girlfriend pretended to like him in front of his son and beat him up when his son wasn't there. Why does he hate me this much? My name is Akari. I work as the manager at a popular hotel, and I'm 26 years old. I'm an Asian woman from Japan. Kenneth and I became friends after a company meeting. Our friendship lasted for 6 months before we confessed our feelings to each other. Things were going smoothly until he introduced me to his parents after engaging me.
Mom, Dad, this is Akari, my fiancé.
Oh my God, you're so beautiful. I'm happy to meet you, dear.
I was welcomed well by my mother-in-law, but it wasn't the same with my father-in-law.
Where are you from?
I'm from Japan, father. Both my parents are Asians.
I don't support this. I'd love for my son to get married to a fellow American.
Honestly, I appreciated the fact that he came out plain to me, but I thought I had a chance. Kenneth loved me, and his mother also did. I thought it wouldn't be hard to convince his father.
Don't leave yet, dear. Let me prepare dinner quickly. I'd love you to join us.
I was happy when she asked me to have dinner, and I agreed. However, when she asked her husband for some money to get things to prepare dinner with, he flared up.
Where do you expect me to get money from? I have no money.
Kenneth eventually gave his mother some money, and she left for the grocery store. Kenneth excused himself to go get water. While I remained in the living room with his father, we were both silent. His phone suddenly rang. He hurriedly picked it up as soon as he grabbed the phone.
$1,000? Is that all I'll be needing? Oh, will that bring enough profit? All right, I'll send it to you soon.
I was taken aback. The same man who'd just told his wife that he had no money was the one about to send $1,000 to someone. When Kenneth walked back into the living room, he put on a pitiful expression.
I have no money in my bank anymore, Ken. Could you wire me some? Your mother just asked for money and I couldn't give her. Do you know how ashamed that made me feel?
I was even more shocked when he burst out crying. Why was he pretending? I wanted to tell Kenneth about the call, but I held back. I didn't want to destroy the family. Instead, I put in effort to try winning the man's love. I visited him 2 days later, alone.
Oh dear, you're here. I'm so happy to see you again.
Have you broken up with my son? Is that what you're here to tell us?
I expected such words from him. No, Father. I'm here to talk to you. I love Kenneth, sir. I'll do anything you want to have you support us. His eyes lit up.
Send me some money and I'll consider you.
I found his request absurd. How could he be so shameless? I left the house angrily and headed to Kenneth's office. I explained what happened and he flew into rage.
How could he disgrace me like that? I give him money anytime he asks. Why would he ask from you too?
Seeing Kenneth so angry made me regret telling him. I pleaded with him not to confront his father, but he refused and left his office. The next day, I got a visitor. I was surprised to see Kenneth's father walk into my office. Hello, Father. What are you doing here? You should have called me to come over instead of stressing yourself.
My son came to the house yesterday and yelled at me. He's never done that in his life. Are you happy? My family is getting destroyed because of you.
No, Father. I didn't mean it like that. I'd never destroy your family. I'm sorry. I was taken aback when he suddenly started crying loudly. I tried to stop him, but he continued until my boss and a few other workers rushed into my office. They asked what happened, and my father-in-law, in tears, lied that I'd poisoned his son's mind against him.
This Japanese girl told my son bad things about me, followed him to the house, and watched him yell at me. My son almost hit his father because of her. I took her as my daughter. She requested money from me, and I refused to give her because I'm just a poor old man.
I was shocked to my bones. How could he tell such a lie? I tried to explain myself, but everyone was staring at me with judgmental eyes. I felt bad and had to leave work early that day. I told Kenneth about it, but he pleaded with me to forgive the man. He didn't want to go to him to avoid further issues. 2 days later, I visited him. I sent him a few dollars and he seemed happy.
Take a picture with me, daughter.
My joy knew no bounds. I accepted and we took a few pictures together. We even followed each other on our social media platforms. I was surprised to see he had 1 million followers. However, you can imagine my shock when I found a picture of us together on his profile the next day, with another horrible one just below. My father-in-law covered his head and arms with bandages. In his caption, he wrote that his son's Japanese girlfriend pretended to like him in front of his son and beat him up when his son wasn't there. Why does he hate me this much? Kenneth called me because he also saw the post. He was furious. He apologized to me for his father's behavior and promised to speak to him once he leaves his workplace. However, that wasn't enough to clear the damage he already caused. He tagged me to the post, making so many strangers storm my message box with insults and curses. Added to that, the hotel workers also began to gossip about my supposed evil behavior toward my father-in-law. I was devastated. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was my father-in-law. What's the problem, Father? Why are you crying?
I've been mean to you, dear. I'm so sorry. If you don't mind, can you come over? I'd like to go somewhere and reflect, and I want you to come with me.
I was super excited that he finally admitted to his wrongdoings. I left everything I had to do and rushed out, driving as fast as I could to the house. He offered to drive and we left. He drove me to a popular place filled with high mountains.
Let's go up there.
I'm sorry, Father. I have a phobia for height. I can't go with you.
Come on, dear. While I reflect, you can also try getting rid of your phobia. It's almost a new year. We should leave everything we don't like behind us.
I reasoned with his words and agreed to go with him. I was extremely scared, but I managed to climb all the way to the top with him. However, once we got to the top, my father-in-law suddenly burst into loud laughter.
I'm going to leave you here, you Japanese. I hope you fall to your death.
Father, I'm scared. Don't leave me, please. He ignored my pleas and went down the mountain without me. I was stuck there, fidgeting in fear and screaming at the top of my voice for someone to help me. It wasn't until after an hour before a couple who came up finally helped me. I fainted once we got down and had to be rushed to the hospital. Apparently, he knew about my phobia from an old post I made and used it against me. I'm sorry, Ken, but I can't forgive your father this time. I do not wish to ever see him again. Ken supported me, as he was also angered and disappointed. He promised to relocate with me to a faraway country after our wedding, but that wasn't enough for me. I needed to get back at him. I knew he also had a rare phobia for scented things. I visited him while he was alone, wearing a strong perfume. The moment I walked in, he got hit by a seizure. I went to him and held him close to myself, screaming for help. When he fainted, I called Ken, fake crying.
The seizure affected his brain greatly. I'm afraid he won't be able to speak or move for a while.
I cried the most. Was I blamed? No. They thought I didn't know about his phobia and had to even comfort me. He was left in charge of a girl I brought from my hometown, while Ken, my mother-in-law, and I relocated to Australia. I did ask the girl to have the fun of her life and not worry about him. She did more than I asked. The next time we visited him, he'd become so lanky and couldn't even see anymore. Ken and his mother tried to take the money he had in his bank, but it was discovered that he'd moved it into an untraceable account. That made them despise him even more. Well, poor him. I paid a hacker beforehand to move the funds. It's been 3 months. The hacker and I have shared his $30,000 and my father-in-law's on his deathbed, unable to deny the claims of him transferring the money and having to cope with the fact that his Japanese daughter-in-law is pregnant for his son.
Upset? Mary, this is more than upset. It's like, family traditions thrown away.
I didn't want to upset you, Sophia. I just cook the way I know.
No, we're not, Mary. Your pasta is, how you say, betrayal of ancestors. I can't believe my son married a non-Italian who can't cook.
Hey, everyone! Hey, friends. I'm Mary, and I spend my days writing technical stuff for a company downtown. It's a bit like translating complicated things into simple words. It's a hard job, and to unwind, I like to travel and explore different places. I am also a bit of a simple, free spirit. I like to wear t-shirts and cutoffs and tie my hair into a ponytail. I am not a fashionista. A few years ago, I wanted to tell you about my most recent trip to Italy. It was my very first time, and I was amazed at all of the historical sites as well as the great pizzas. I was just minding my own business when I met Marco, this cute Italian guy. At first, things were great. Picture this. I'm sitting at the iconic Trevi fountain, completely absorbed in my thoughts. Lost in the beauty of Rome, I accidentally dropped my iPhone into the fountain. And then, out of the blue, a kind stranger appears. It's Marco. He swoops down, picks up my phone in the fountain, and wipes it off with his shirt. To my amazement, the phone worked, and that's when our eyes met. We laugh about the little mishap, and as we talk, he shares that he's from New York too, and in Rome to visit his mother. His dad had recently passed away, and he was there to lend support and spend time with family. Fast forward, we hit it off, and love blossoms. We decided to get married too. A few weeks after we got married, Marco allowed his mother to come join us. After all, she was lonely in Italy because her husband died. At first, Marco's mother, Sophia, seemed pleasant and sophisticated, but after a few weeks in the household, she became more vocal and started complaining about my cooking.
Mary, I try your pasta with canned sauce. It, not making sense.
Sophia, I know you love our family recipes, but I find the canned sauce easier.
Easier? Mary, not just easier, it's, how you say, disrespectful to family cooking history.
Sophia, I do not mean to hurt feelings. I just like quick cooking.
Quick or not, your pasta, lacking the soul and, how you say, essence.
I'm sorry if it upsets you, Sophia. I just cook differently.
Upset? Mary, this is more than upset. It's like, family traditions thrown away.
I didn't want to upset you, Sophia. I just cook the way I know.
No, we're not, Mary. Your pasta is, how you say, betrayal of ancestors. I can't believe my son married a non-Italian who can't cook.
Well, Sophia, sorry if you feel that way. I'll still cook my way. Things didn't get better after that. Sophia and I argued over everything. She complained about the lack of Italian TV and forced me to subscribe to a channel. She also told me up front that I didn't dress classy like an Italian woman. Most times I ignored the criticism and carried on with my regular work as normal. After a tiring day at the office, Marco suggested I talk to Sophia about going shopping and taking her to the Italian Cultural Center. The plan was for me to drop her off and pick her up, giving her a chance to meet new people and join clubs, hoping it would lift her spirits. I did this for several weeks, and it was exhausting driving to the center and also taking her on mini trips to the hair salon or to meet a new friend at a coffee shop. I was outraged at all my running around, and Marco wouldn't do anything about this. One weekend, I looked forward to some time off, but Sophia informed me and my husband that she had invited 3 new friends from the Italian Center over for dinner. It became apparent that Sophia's friends were like her, older, stuck-up, and critical. After I slaved over the dinner, I was heading back with their dessert when I overheard some whispering among the guests.
Did you look at her closely? I don't think she is pretty enough for Marco.
I agree. She looks old for her age. She doesn't dress very well. She's Asian, so her cooking is so bad. I am going to barf.
I am so sorry. Had I known her cooking would be so terrible, I would have ordered in food or made it myself.
Come to my house and we will have a real meal.
After spending the evening with Sophia's friends, I was angry beyond words. I felt tired and annoyed, so I talked to Marco about it. I told him I was fed up with the gossip and criticism, and that maybe his mom should leave for a while to ease things. Marco didn't understand. He said I was too sensitive and needed to learn Italian and adapt to the family. It made me feel unheard and unsupported. I explained that it's not just about being sensitive, it's about feeling included and not judged all the time. I also mentioned the language barrier, but Marco blamed me for not learning Italian and said his mom won't leave, and I need to adjust. The argument with Marco left me sad and confused. I tried to tell him how tough it was for me, but he said I needed to change. He even said I could leave if I didn't like things. Feeling upset, I went to my room and cried a lot. Later, I heard Marco and his mom arguing in the kitchen. She threatened to leave if I didn't cook better and act differently. Marco promised he'd make me change. The next day, I packed my things and went back to live with my parents. I needed to think about my relationship and hoped that Marco would tell Sophia to treat me more respectfully. But 2 weeks later, I got a text from Marco requesting a divorce. In the meantime, Marco and Sophia were living in the house that I helped us buy. It made me sad. In the end, we decided to sell the house and split the proceeds. Because it was a tight market, we got a reasonable price for the house and gladly gave Marco's share to him. With my share of the money, I bought a condo and lived in it with my pets. Marco also used the money to buy a condo, but the place was smaller than our previous house, which made Sophia take issue with what happened. I suddenly got lots of text messages from Marco's mother, who was blaming me for the whole thing.
Mary, all these problems are because of you. I am stuck living in this dump, and this mess is all your fault.
My fault. You made me work night and day for you. You never gave me credit for anything. You are the one who wanted Marco to divorce me.
You are just a no-good Asian woman. My son should have married an Italian woman in the beginning.
Don't text me anymore. Goodbye and good riddance. A year ago, I found out that Sophia's friend, Lucia, introduced her beautiful daughter, Samantha, to Marco. She was born and raised in Rome and loved to cook Italian food. This woman and Marco hit it off, and I was even invited to their traditional Italian wedding. I didn't do too badly myself and ended up dating a fellow at my workplace. Daniel is also divorced, and he and I spend our evenings together. We are planning to get married next year. Things seemed to be going normal until yesterday when Sophia came to my house in tears, asking me to live at my place. She told me Marco found out that Samantha was making money as a sex worker on OnlyFans. She had thousands of followers and was making tons of money. The only thing is that the tax department says Samantha owes them $1 million in tax penalties because she hadn't filed an income tax in years. Marco hadn't any idea how Samantha was making money and was spending her money on investments that tanked. They are now bankrupt and Sophia needs a place to stay. Marco was also planning to divorce his new wife. He begged me to take him back too.
Please forgive me, Mary. I made a mistake.
It's too late. I have a new life now.
Don't forget how we met. I saved your phone. Remember our fabulous nights together.
I want to move on. If you weren't such a mama's boy and listened to your mother all the time, things might have been different.
Please, I don't have a place to stay. Let me and Mom stay with you. I promise things will be different.
Go away. You created this mess. I also received a text from Sophia asking me to take her and her son back, but I refused to budge. She told me she is constantly harassed and she is staying in a women's shelter because Marco lost his home due to bankruptcy. She says she has no idea where Marco is and is afraid he is doing drugs and living on the streets because his wife introduced him to crack cocaine. Sophia says she is working at Walmart and will gladly pay for a room with me, but I told her off. I said I was sick of her insults and her bossiness. Weeks later, I heard she was so rude to an ex-Navy SEAL who beat her up before the police came, and she had to spend days in the hospital with a broken nose. She get what she deserved. I have no sympathy for people who are rude, racist, insulting, and unappreciative. What would you do? High school seemed to be going perfect, until one day, we heard there was a new student joining our freshman class. It normally would be awesome to have a new friend join our school, but it would turn out to not be such a great thing. His name was Jeff. Jeff was tall, but not as tall as JoJo, and he was very muscular. It became clear what kind of kid Jeff was very quickly. We began hearing stories of how Jeff was cornering kids in the bathroom and shaking them down for lunch money. We even heard that he set up a booby trap that made Mrs. Jones trip and fall down. Safe to say, he was a bully. I'm Katie, and this is the story of how my bully managed to sneak onto my teacher's computer and change me and my best friend's grades to all Fs. My story is far from the average back-to-school story, and I'm going to tell you all the events that led to this awful bully doing this evil deed to me and my best friend. I first met my best friend JoJo on our first day of freshman year. She was tall and super funny. My first impression of her was when she raised her hand and started singing a song in the middle of class. After this, I just had to go up to her and start a conversation. Hey, you're really funny. I loved your singing voice.
Hey, thanks. I practice every night. What's your name?
My name is Catherine, but you can call me Katie. What's yours?
My name is Joanna, but my homies call me JoJo.
I laughed so hard that day as I talked with my new friend JoJo. We even found out we shared most of the same classes, and even had so much in common too. For example, me and JoJo both loved exercising, and we quickly began going on runs with each other every morning. Safe to say, JoJo became my new best friend, and we began spending all the time we could together. High school seemed to be going perfect, until one day, we heard there was a new student joining our freshman class. It normally would be awesome to have a new friend join our school, but it would turn out to not be such a great thing. His name was Jeff. Jeff was tall, but not as tall as JoJo, and he was very muscular. It became clear what kind of kid Jeff was very quickly. We began hearing stories of how Jeff was cornering kids in the bathroom and shaking them down for lunch money. We even heard that he set up a booby trap that made Mrs. Jones trip and fall down. Safe to say, he was a bully, and me and JoJo did not like that he was ruining our high school experience. JoJo brought up her concerns one day while we were resting after one of our runs.
Katie, how does it make you feel that we have to be scared of Jeff every day?
Trust me, I hate it just as much as you do.
Well, let's do something about it. We can't let him keep getting away with this nonsense.
Do something? Like what? What can we do? We are girls and he is a strong boy.
I don't care. I'm going to go up to him tomorrow during lunch and tell him to stop his bullying.
Wow, you're so brave, JoJo. That's one of the reasons you're my best friend. I will be there for backup just in case things get ugly. The next day, I felt nervous for JoJo. We didn't know how Jeff would react, and I was scared he would hurt my best friend. When lunch came, it was time for JoJo to take a stand. I followed her over to Jeff's seat, where he was making fun of another student.
Hey, Jeff, cut that out right now. You have no right to be making fun of a fellow student. They're just like you and me. What gives you the right to be so mean to everybody?
Who even are you? Mind your own business. Being mean to people makes me happy. I love seeing these weaker kids cry when I hurt them or make them embarrassed. What are you gonna do about it?
You're a bully, and nobody likes a bully. If you keep this behavior up, you'll end up with no friends, no family, and you'll die alone one day in a house all by yourself. It's so easy to be kind, even you would be able to do it. You should try it sometime.
Get out of here, weirdo. You're ugly and you're too tall. Girls aren't supposed to be that tall. I'm going to get back at you two for confronting me like this. You'll see.
I could tell it hurt JoJo's feelings when Jeff mentioned her height. JoJo had told me one day before a run that she didn't like how tall she was, and how she wished she was small like I was. As we left lunch, I saw tears start to well up in JoJo's eyes. I gave her a hug and assured her that Jeff was only insecure about his own height, which is why he picked on hers. I explained to her that sometimes boys get insecure and defensive when they see girls who are bigger than them. This seemed to cheer her up, and we decided to put the whole thing behind us and move on with our lives. A couple days later, while me and JoJo were enjoying outdoor recess and hanging out near the walls of our school, we saw something peculiar through the window. We took a closer look and practically passed out when we saw what was happening. It was Jeff, and he was sneaking into our head teacher's office. Our head teacher was named Mr. Sampson, and we knew he would not want this happening. We didn't know what to do, so we just stood there shocked, watching for what he would do next. We saw him sneak over to the computer, open it, and begin typing. We knew Jeff was up to no good, but we didn't know what. I found out the hard way what he had done that night when I went home. My mom and dad sat me down on the couch and told me we had to talk.
Katie, there's a serious problem. Me and your father got a notice today that you have all Fs and are now at risk of staying back. This is so unlike you, and I can't believe you let this happen.
We are very disappointed in you, Katie.
This isn't true. I had all A's just yesterday. Oh my God, I think I know what happened.
Well, explain yourself.
It was Jeff, the bully at our school. He logged onto Mr. Sampson's computer and changed me and JoJo's grades to all Fs.
I don't believe that for a second. You're grounded. Go to your room.
I was devastated that my parents didn't believe me, but I wasn't surprised. I couldn't believe Jeff could be so evil to change my grades and get me in trouble. I called JoJo and asked her if she was having the same problem. And I wasn't shocked when I learned that she was. We knew we had to do something to set the record straight. In school the next day, me and JoJo met up and discussed our options. We decided we would explain our whole situation to Mr. Sampson and try to get him to change our grades back to the A's we had before. In Mr. Sampson's office, we told him everything. To our surprise, he believed us immediately and changed our grades back. He explained how he has been seeing Jeff's bullying and knew sooner or later he would try to pull off a stunt like this. With our grades back to normal, it was time to take care of Jeff. We realized that when Jeff found out our grades were A's again, he would try and change them back to F's, but this time we would be prepared. As we passed Jeff in the hall, he questioned us about our grades.
Hey, losers. How are your grades?
My grades are all A's still, and I'm super happy. How about you, JoJo?
My grades are perfect. All A's here as well. So who's the loser now, Jeff?
What? That can't be. Something must have gone wrong here. You twerps stay right here. I have to go do something.
JoJo and I knew exactly what Jeff was going to do. He was going to sneak back into the head teacher's office and change our grades back to F's. It was time to carry out our plan. We quickly grabbed Mr. Sampson and told him he needed to see something outside. He followed us outside, and we led him right to the window looking into his office. There, we all watched as we saw the evil bully, Jeff, sneaking into Mr. Sampson's office. Mr. Sampson grew very angry as he saw Jeff open his computer and begin typing on it. Finally, we had the proof we needed to put an end to Jeff's horrible doings. Mr. Sampson stormed inside the school and waited outside his office for Jeff to come out. Me and JoJo watched as Jeff opened the door slowly and froze when he saw Mr. Sampson standing over him.
I didn't do it, I swear. The jig is up, Jeff. I was watching through the window and saw exactly what you did. You're in big trouble, Jeff. Just wait until your mother hears what you've been up to. Please don't call my mom. I'm sorry, I won't do it again.
It's too late for that, Jeff. It's time to face the music. Me and JoJo went home happy that day. Mr. Sampson changed our grades back to A's again and apologized for all that we went through. It was the biggest relief to get home and hear apologies from my parents, as they explained that head teacher, Mr. Sampson, had called them and explained everything. They apologized for falsely punishing me and quickly ungrounded me. Jojo called me and told me she was also ungrounded, and we hurried to meet up to practice our favorite thing, running. It wasn't until the next day at school when we heard what happened to Jeff. As it turns out, he was permanently expelled from school and he will never return. On top of this, when his mother found out that her son had been the school bully, she grabbed him by the arm and told him he would be getting a job cleaning toilets to support the family, and that he would not be allowed to hang out with friends for at least 2 years. Me and Jojo became closer since this incident, and the whole school loved us for taking care of the bully problem. We continued through school in peace and continued to run together. We even joined the track team. And that was the story of how me and my best friend Jojo got revenge on the bully who changed our grades to Fs. My only question for you is, would you have done the same? I vehemently refused to sign it. He reported to his parents.
You must sign the papers or I'll force you to.
I stood my ground and refused to sign it. In anger, Edward sent a resounding slap across my face.
Shouldn't you be grateful that I'm trying to help an orphan like you? Fine, don't sign it. Prepare to bear the consequences of your action.
True to his words, I bore the consequences. He stopped giving me money, and his parents regularly visited to taunt me. Hi, my name is Betty and my husband's name is Edward. Edward and I were married for barely 6 years. His parents and mine were friends while mine were still alive. But unfortunately, I lost both my parents from corona. They died 2 months before my 26th birthday, leaving me in charge of their properties. Edward's parents visited me 2 weeks after their funeral.
We're sorry for your loss, dear, but don't you think you'll be needing someone to assist you in managing your father's properties?
I thought about it. Although my father had a personal manager for himself, I believed I'd truly be needing one for myself. I agreed with them and promised to find one soon.
Oh dear, you don't have to go through that stress. Edward is here for you. He's good with business and will help you well.
I was grateful to him and agreed to bring Edward in. We were quite close, so I did feel comfortable working with him. I'd always had a huge crush on him for as long as I knew him. So when he asked me to be his girlfriend 3 months later, I didn't hesitate to agree. We dated for only 1 month before he asked me to marry him. I was even more than happy. His parents supported us and arranged a wedding quickly. We got married 2 months later, and we moved into one of my parents' mansions as a couple.
Since I'm your husband now, I should be in charge of the companies.
His suggestion was weird, but I agreed. He was my husband, and I thought he was wiser. Things were going smoothly for the first 2 months of our wedding, until everything suddenly went south. Edward's parents barely called to check on me like they used to, and Edward completely shut me out of all my father's businesses. One day he returned home early.
Get dressed. We're having dinner at my parents'.
I did as he asked, and we both left.
Oh my God, Betty, what are you wearing? How could you dress so classless to a gathering as important as this? And you even look fat in it,
Gathering? I was confused. Edward had told me it was just dinner at their house. I was also wearing a dress she'd personally gifted me on my wedding day. How could she call it classless? I was about to speak, but she suddenly turned to someone else, brushing me aside.
Sweetheart, I'm so happy you made it.
The lady's face was unfamiliar. I watched as Edward's parents received her warmly. Edward, who'd been silent all along, moved away from me and went to give the lady a hug. Afterward, they all went into the house, leaving me all alone. With a confused mind, I quietly followed them in. I was shocked to see the people there. His family members were all present. I stopped for a moment, watching as all of them exchanged pleasantries with the lady. They seemed to love and respect her a lot. I took a deep breath and approached the table where they all sat and attempted to take the only chair left. But my father-in-law stopped me.
Why are you here? Go wait in the living room. We're having an important conversation here.
I was beyond shocked. How could he disgrace me like that in front of everyone? I was about to leave when the lady asked me to stay. The family only let me sit after she spoke. I was embarrassed. Soon, the lady had to leave.
She still is beautiful. If we knew she'd come back, we would have just asked Edward to wait and marry her instead.
She's way better than Betty. She's beautiful and enviably elegant.
I was taken aback. I turned to look at Edward, but all he did was smile. I expected him to say something in my defense, but he didn't.
I still regret not waiting for her. She has everything I want in a woman. I wish I could turn back the hands of time.
Instead, right in front of me. I was pissed off, but I tried my best to hide it.
Betty, that lady's Aurora, Edward's first girlfriend. Did you see how classy she looked?
When Edward was dating Aurora, I had so many friends. Everyone wanted to associate with me for having her in our family. Now they all call me the sister-in-law of an ugly orphan. I won't forgive you for this, Edward.
I turned to Edward, but he still had his smile on his face. I dropped my fork, my appetite lost. Throughout the evening, all they spoke about was Aurora. I was relieved when we finally left the house. Edward refused to say a word to me when we got home. I ended up sleeping alone in our room while he went to the guest room. The next morning, I woke up to noises in the house. Rushing out of my room, I saw different strange men in the living room, painting the walls. I called Edward and asked what was going on.
Aurora will be visiting tomorrow. I'm changing everything in the house to her favorite colors.
I was shocked. I stormed to his parents' house, but their words only left me more shocked.
There's nothing you can do about it. Aurora is more special to us and you can't change that.
I called my friend and told her about the situation.
How dare they say that? They must forget about her or you divorce him.
The suggestion of divorcing him didn't sit well with me. I returned home with the conclusion that I'll speak to Edward, but it seemed to be a wrong move.
Who are you to tell me what to do in my house? I don't love you. I just married you because you're rich. My heart belongs to Aurora. Deal with that.
Aurora came over the next day, and Edward sent me out. I had to spend 2 nights at my friend's place before returning home to see that Aurora was still there. She recognized me and asked if I was a friend to Edward, but he responded before I could.
Her parents are dead and left her with nothing to survive. My parents and I are helping her until she gets a job and becomes independent.
My mouth hung open in shock. He ordered me to go to the guest room and locked me there without food or water until Aurora finally left in the evening. 2 months later, he brought a document for me to sign. When I read through it, I realized he needed my signature to agree that I was handing over every property I owned to him. I vehemently refused to sign it. He reported to his parents.
You must sign the papers or I'll force you to.
I stood my ground and refused to sign it. In anger, Edward sent a resounding slap across my face.
Shouldn't you be grateful that I'm trying to help an orphan like you? Fine, don't sign it. Prepare to bear the consequences of your action.
True to his words, I bore the consequences. He stopped giving me money, and his parents regularly visited to taunt me. I reported to my best friend again.
You must take action now before that bastard does even worse things to you.
I took her words this time. My mother had a company she ran without the knowledge of my father. She left me in charge of it, 2 weeks before their death. I'd planned to hand it to Edward on his 30th birthday, but I was glad it hadn't gotten to the month. With some of the money I got from it, which was kept in 2 banks I also hid from him, I hired a lawyer and filed for divorce behind his back. One day, Edward asked me to go with him to his parents. Without arguing, I did, only to meet Aurora there again. I waited patiently until they were done with dinner before presenting the divorce papers to them.
Huh? She's your wife? I can't believe this. Don't you dare call my phone again. I'm cutting off every connection I have with you.
Aurora stormed out. They hurled all manner of insults at me, but I didn't mind. Edward angrily signed the papers without thinking, and that was all I needed. We spent the next 1 week in and out of court to get all of my parents' properties back. Apparently, he'd forged my signature. The case ended with me getting everything from him, including all the money he's made, and him getting a 2-year sentence to jail, as his parents were too broke to pay the $5,000 fine. It was during that period that I knew that their family business went bankrupt, and they made me marry Edward so they could take over that of my parents. After taking what I owned back, they were left with almost nothing. Aurora never showed up again. I ran my father's businesses alone for a year and expanded it across the globe. 2 years later, I received some visitors. Edward and his parents. I'd heard that they sold their mansion. They lived in a smaller house, and Edward got a job as a postman.
We're sorry for how we treated you. Please give our son a second chance.
That angered me. I called for some of my security guards who came in with huge dogs and chased Edward and his parents out of my company. 1 year later, I heard his parents died from depression. I couldn't be happier. As for Edward, well, I heard he too is depressed and spends time drinking and smoking. I even heard he now shares a small apartment with 6 other housemates. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment. By the time I returned, 2 weeks later, I was met with the shock of my life. After watching the recordings from his car and the voice recorder that I had left in our bedroom, I now knew the truth. My husband was having an affair with my best friend. Not only that, but he was also planning to divorce me once Jason was 18. The two of them had even begun making plans to kill my brother and take his inheritance. That was the reason he adopted him, so that it would be easier for him. I was dumbfounded. My parents were both successful business people in New York. My father owned 3 thriving chocolate companies, while my mother had one that exported fabrics to different countries. In other words, we were wealthy. My brother Jason was born 10 years after me, but was born with crippled legs. They were unable to grow muscles very well and were said to be too weak to hold him up. My parents had him undergo necessary surgeries and a variety of different therapy sessions, but nothing worked. We finally gave up trying and accepted his condition. He had to move with the aid of a special wheelchair. However, his disability didn't stop us from loving him. Instead, it made us love him more. The two of us very close. We wore matching clothes throughout our childhood and teenage years despite the large difference in our ages and had each other's backs when needed. Over the years, our parents' businesses grew even broader. We went to the best schools, and by the time I was 25, I'd completed my education and was ready to get into the world of business. As expected, my father put me in charge of one of his companies. One afternoon, I was at a park with my brother, enjoying the evening breeze, when a young man approached us.
Hello, I'm Desmond. Can I sit with you both?
He looked quite decent. Nevertheless, I alerted our bodyguard who was standing around. We had been hounded by a few reporters in the past, and I thought he could be one. In case he wanted to start interviewing us, our bodyguard would come out to stop him. However, he proved my thoughts wrong. He simply spent the 30 minutes he sat with us reading. Afterward, he left. 2 weeks later, I had to recruit workers for some new positions I had created, and Desmond was one of those who applied. I was impressed at how well he did and took him in before others.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I'll make sure to do my best.
True to his word, he showed his efficiency in the first 2 months, and as time went on, he was excelling at any task that he was given. Seeing this, I figured that he would make a great personal assistant, and I offered him the position. He eagerly accepted, and we began working and spending more time together, which made us get closer than we ever thought. One day, after working, he confessed to me.
I have a huge crush on you, ma'am.
I was shocked, yes, but it was mutual. I couldn't deny that I also liked him. Our relationship proceeded from there, and soon I had to introduce him to my parents.
Isn't he just an employee? Are you sure he truly loves you, or he's just here for your money?
They were doubtful about his intentions, but I did my best to convince them that he was being real with me. My brother, who hadn't seen him since the first time we met, recognized him and took a liking to him immediately. After some time, he proposed to me. Jason congratulated us when we announced it to my family.
Desmond treats me so well. I support your marriage.
Although my parents were still quite doubtful, they had no choice but to support their daughter's happiness. Our wedding wasn't so elaborate, but it was grand. According to Desmond, his parents were dead and he had no relatives, so he had no one by him for the wedding. But I didn't mind. 3 months after our wedding, my parents met with a plane crash accident that claimed their lives. It was a tough period for my brother and I. But Desmond was there for us. He comforted us until we managed to get over it. 3 months later, he suddenly brought up a proposal.
Since Jason isn't of age to control the other companies, why don't I take charge until then?
I didn't like the idea and refused. That brought about our first argument.
I'm your husband. Don't you trust me to do well?
I let him understand that I trusted him. However, even though I didn't like the idea, my parents had set a rule that no one except my brother and I could run the companies. He finally understood my point, and that issue died. I managed to oversee all companies and ensured to expand them even more than my parents did. My husband still worked under me, and I was grateful that he was satisfied with it. Around that time, we began trying to have a child, but none came. Worried, I went to a doctor to find out what was wrong, and they told me that I would need years of fertility treatments if I wanted a chance of becoming pregnant. I was devastated, but as usual, my husband comforted me.
2-3 years isn't a long time. I can wait.
I felt relieved. If Desmond was fine with waiting, I was too. Sometime later, he brought up another suggestion.
Babe, why don't we adopt your brother? While we wait for our children, let's start learning to be parents by taking care of him.
I tried to tell him that Jason was fine being my brother and his in-law, but Desmond was persistent on adopting him. After a few persuasions, I finally agreed. After all, it's entirely for our good. I informed my brother, who was 15 years of age, about our plan. He seemed skeptical about agreeing at first, but he later did after I convinced him that Desmond would be a great father to him, and it would help me learn to be a good mother.
I'm only agreeing to this because I love you both.
We soon began the necessary process. It took about 2 weeks, and afterward we were both legal parents of my brother. Desmond proved to be a great father. He was doing so well that I was free to leave Jason in his care when I had to travel to Italy to take care of an important issue that arose in my father's second company. However, when I returned, I got some news that didn't sit well with me.
Aunt Kathy came over while you were away, and she was here until yesterday. She always slept in the same room with Desmond. He barely had time for me and treated me differently during that period.
I was surprised. Kathy was my best friend, and she told me she was away on a vacation in the UK. I asked my brother if he was sure about what he was saying, and he confirmed that he was. Kathy and Desmond were always bickering every time they were around each other. How could she suddenly spend a whole week with him, and while I was away? I confronted Desmond.
What? How could Jason tell such a lie? I was hardly ever home because I was always at work. You can ask the chef. She was the one who watched over Jason throughout the period you were away.
I called the chef and she confessed that Desmond was telling the truth. I felt betrayed. Why would Jason tell such a lie? I disciplined him greatly. However, no matter how much words I said to him, he stuck to the fact that he was telling the truth. I buried the issue and apologized to Desmond. I also had Jason apologize to him too. A week later, I had to travel again. This time, I spent 3 weeks. On the day I was to return, I got a video message from Jason. As I opened it, I was shocked to see Kathy leaving the house with Desmond. I hurriedly returned home.
I was telling the truth. He's cheating on you.
I was furious. I requested a video call with Kathy, and when she accepted, I saw that she was in bed with her husband. I thought she was pretending and asked her husband a few questions. In his response,
"We've been home together all day. What are you talking about?"
I was confused. What do I believe? The picture clearly showed Kathy, and Jason said she left that morning, but Kathy's husband was saying otherwise. I couldn't confront Desmond again. Jason had told me how Desmond threatened to kill him if he said anything to me again. I decided to confide in one of my friends who gave me some advice.
You have to see it yourself to know the truth.
I followed her advice. Before I had to travel again, I contacted my personal lawyer. If it ended up being true, I was going to file for divorce. I set a camera in his car and a voice recorder before leaving again. I spent even longer there. By the time I returned, 2 weeks later, I was met with the shock of my life. After watching the recordings from his car and the voice recorder that I had left in our bedroom, I now knew the truth. My husband was having an affair with my best friend. Not only that, but he was also planning to divorce me once Jason was 18. The two of them had even begun making plans to kill my brother and take his inheritance. That was the reason he adopted him, so that it would be easier for him. I was dumbfounded to think that I didn't believe my brother and stupidly made him apologize for trying to tell me the truth. After giving the voice recordings to my lawyer, I stormed to Kathy's house. I was speechless when I arrived and saw not one but two Kathys. She introduced the second lady as her best friend. I explained what I was there for and showed the video to her and her best friend. In it, Kathy was making plans to kill my brother and then had used her best friend to make it look like she was innocent. Having been found out, Kathy was disappointed.
I'm so sorry for my behavior toward your family, Amelia. Please forgive her.
But I wasn't interested in forgiveness. I called the police and she was taken away. I stormed to my company with more police officers and arrested Desmond. Confused and not knowing what was happening, he yelled as they pulled him away.
Let go of me! I'm not a criminal!
At the station, they were both told their crimes and bowed their heads in shame. They were charged in court for planning to murder. Desmond had a longer term because at the time, Jason was his son. I divorced him and took full custody of my brother, ensuring he would never have any right over him. My brother and I relocated to Italy afterward. 5 years later, Desmond was released. I'd gotten married to someone better 2 years before. Hearing that he was out, I returned to the country with my husband, Jason, and my daughter. He heard that I was in town and came to see me to tender his apology. He was without a job and had no house of his own. He told me that his parents, which he lied at the beginning were dead, were in serious debts and also had failing health, and he needed his job back as companies were refusing to accept an ex-convict as an employee. I refused, telling him, "I wish you suffer for the rest of your miserable life." Afterward, I had my security men drag him out of my office and throw him out of the building. Months later, received a call from his parents that he made some really bad friends and was so broken they decided to rob a jewelry shop and was shot in the process. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.